Hey, this is Dan from learningcameras.com, and I'm just going to take a couple pictures to go over these two cameras of a sunset. They're both set exactly the same, manual, 1/250th of a second at 5.6 at ISO 400, and they're both going to be shooting at RAW plus JPEG. Also, I have the white balances the exact same at and let me take it quick before the sunset goes. And they're both at the same focal length, no differences between them except the two cameras. Now, one is a full frame camera and one is a DX crop, and so right now I've got the DX camera at a 30mm and the FX at a 48mm to give those just about the same. And we'll take a look at some of the results from those. Now, when we take a look at these files, keep in mind that both of them were shot in RAW and brought into their respective editors and converted into TIFF files with no adjustments whatsoever. These are pure out-of-camera files. Now, they were brought into Nikon and Nikon software, Canon and Canon software, because Lightroom does not have the ability to import RAW from the Nikon D600 at this point in time. So when we did that, we brought in the Canon 7D file, converted it to a TIFF file, and we're going to make some adjustments on it later and see how it holds up. But even just natively out of the camera, we are seeing quite a bit of detail, a lot in the grass. We're seeing most of the sky. We're losing out a bit of the top of the sky, but that's something we really have come to expect in cameras today, is to lose some of that sky. And this is at sunset, so this is kind of a worst case scenario. A very hard shot to do without extra lighting. Now, when we look at the Nikon D600, we can see that a lot of that sky is there. It really looks absolutely impressive by comparison to the 7D. I was blown away by the results. I didn't think I would expect to see such a difference in the RAW files without touching them up a little bit. But part of that is going to be due to the full frame sensor, which even the Canons would benefit from, and the other part seems to be the way that Nikon is making that sensor, or even Sony. It's probably a Sony sensor, but it seems to be very impressive in the quality. Now, when we look at the two of those side by side, we can definitely see that the Nikon is holding on to a lot of the detail that the Canon is losing, and really the results are very impressive for just that RAW file. Now, here's at 100%. You can see even more some of that detail that's been held on by the Nikon. Now, here's the big test. Let's see what happens when we push those. For the Canon 7D, when we push the shadows and I drop the highlights, we've brought back some of the sky, but it really appears that some of that sky has been lost. Now, on the 7D, pushing that to 100% in Lightroom brought back a lot of that grass. I was blown away. The problem is when we take a look at those trees, we can definitely see that a lot of the contrast has been lost. It goes now to more of a gray color than a black in the dark areas of the trees. Not that great for that. You probably wouldn't want to push this that far on the shadows, and unfortunately not a lot in the sky came back. When we look at the Nikon, it's staggering the amount of detail that was pulled from the sky. Everything is there. When we push the shadows, everything came back. It really looks like the entire grass was completely lit. And if we look in the shadow areas of the trees, they look pretty dang good. Most of the blacks are still there, and you still have a lot of contrast in that area. This is definitely one of the most impressive things I have seen in a Nikon file. Now, when we take a look at those side by side, you can definitely see it's night and day. There really is no way to argue for the 7D on this one. If you're shooting landscapes and want dynamic range, this is the camera to get. There really is nothing else that's going to match that. Here's at 100% side by side, and it's really unbelievable the amount of detail that Nikon is holding on to, and not just holding on to, but it still looks good in those trees. Now let's take a look just for comparison at the 5D Mark III, because I noticed something different. These are both 5D Mark III files. The one on the left is regular raw, straight out of the camera, no editing. The one on the right has the shadows pushed to 100 and the highlights down. Now I don't see a lot of difference. It doesn't seem like Lightroom is moving much in these files, not like what we were seeing on the Nikon D600. Now when I take a look at the 100% on the two files, we can see that there's some banding in the windows. Nothing dramatic, definitely not nearly as bad as we were seeing on the Canon 7D. These are perfectly usable at a distance. This is only 100% that we're seeing it. When we zoom in to 200, you can see it a little bit more. If you had a lot of shadow areas, it might be more noticeable, but in this type of file, it's really not that difficult to see. But when we take a look at the amount of difference that we were getting out of the Nikon files from beginning to end, it's really just staggering the amount that raw file recorded and that we were able to push in post without seeing any difference. This is not HDR. This is a single raw file. There's no added contrast, sharpening, nothing. Straight raw file out of the camera. The only difference is that the shadows have been turned up and the highlights turned down. And when we take a look at the 100% crop of that, you can see that I mean, we're losing some. It doesn't look as good as when we didn't push it, but definitely this is a very usable file, even pushed 100%, and a lot of the detail is still there in that file. So overall, it's very hard to argue with this picture. I'm looking at it and I keep thinking that this is an edited picture with some kind of adjustments or an HDR shot, and it is not. Just a straight raw file out of the camera. Nothing else other than a shadow boost and a highlight. So stay tuned as we do some more testing between these cameras and take a look at some other features.